6 stages of male development are highlighted in the Bible.
Since we're focusing on the relational priority of the home, it would be helpful for all of you to understand these stages.
These insights come from Robert Hicks' excellent book, The Masculine Journey.
The first stage, the creational male, in Hebrew, Adam, refers to mankind in general, both male and female. Because we're made in the image of God, humanity is distinct from the rest of creation.
The next stage of male development is the phallic male, Hebrew, Zakar. In this stage, a man responds to the innate sexual drive that impels and motivates him toward an intimate relationship. But biblical admonitions constrain him to express that sexuality only with his wife.
In fact, a man's true worship of God begins by fleeing lust and saving himself for the woman he'll take in the covenant of marriage. It's through not giving in to lust that a man begins to learn true responsibility to God. He learns by denying himself for the sake of obedience to his Lord.
When the term Gabor is used in the Hebrew Scriptures, it refers to the third stage of a man's life development, the warrior male. A man in this stage is driven to excel and to conquer. He's known by what he does.
In our culture, this is generally a man in his 20s and 30s and even into his 40s. He's heading for the top in his occupation.
He puts in extra time and effort to gain the trappings of material success and recognition. Maybe a larger house, a newer car, recreational toys.
During this stage, he's often so consumed with a desire for success that he spends little time with his family. People from his workplace or congregation may be praising him for his effort.
But his wife and kids are yearning for a connection that he has no time for. He may even grow angry toward them, thinking they're ungrateful.
But he's bringing home the bacon, as well as filling in activity slots in his congregation. Isn't that enough?
Eventually, man becomes a wounded male, a Nash. During this season, God completes the wounding that wasn't accomplished in earlier stages.
Only through wounding can a man be humbled enough to learn to trust God in ways he couldn't have imagined in prior stages.
Through the trials and disappointments he faces in wounding, he truly begins to understand the needs of those around him.
This is the painful stage I was in for the 3 years that led up to going to Israel. But God knew that my friend Bert could get me at age 47 through the wounded stage.
Often a man goes through the Enosh stage in his 40s or early 50s, but we've encountered those even in their 60s who are still fighting to be warriors. Sadly, they're bludgeoning those around them like old bull elk, trying to shore up their diminishing physical abilities.
To renew his flagging self-image, the wounded man may take up with a younger woman. He ignores the instructional wounds our Father is inflicting to build his character. Instead, he compensates for the pain by giving way to his sin nature.
The wounding he's undergoing creates profound confusion and frustration. He loses the purpose, meaning, and ego satisfaction he had in the warrior stage.
In this culture, this misunderstood stage is called the midlife crisis. It's as though it's some affliction he has to get through so he can get back to being a warrior. Yet God doesn't plan for him to go back. He needs to press on ahead to maturity. The Nash stage is like going through the valley of the shadow of death. And it is a death experience. During this time, a man must learn to die to his old inclinations, goals, and ways. That's the only way he'll clothe himself with humility. And it's an essential part of our Father's design to raise up humble, older men of wisdom who will shepherd his children.
Our Father has designed the wounded stage to develop a man who's totally dependent on him, as was Abraham.
It's only when the total trust and dependence on his Lord is complete that a man emerges from the wounded stage.
The severity of the wounding depends on two factors. First, how much sin the man tolerated in his past. And second, his personal access to, or lack of, older role models in the faith in earlier stages.
The Hebrew term ish defines the mature male. This is a man who's passed through his wounded period to become a person of dignity and integrity.
At this stage of his life, a man is known by his character, by who he is. He's no longer known by what he does.
The competitive spirit and desire to achieve what once drove him has been exchanged for love, mercy, and compassion. He's now beginning to reflect our Father's heart.
The mature male senses a renewal of life purpose. Because he's no longer a warrior, he's able to cooperate with other men with a servant's heart. His humility enables him to coordinate with others in service to Jesus.
Paul's admonition carries special meaning for him. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. This is the true understanding of humility.
At the same time, the mature male's dependence on his Lord empowers him to confront others about foolishness and practices that aren't of God.
The courage to represent the interests of our Father grows inside him. This culminates in the next stage, the sage or elder.
If his marriage has endured through the wounding process, he finds his love for his wife growing in new dimensions. His appreciation for her deepens, and they can be a highly effective team to help younger couples.
In particular, the mature male recognizes how our Father has always wanted to use his wife to teach him meekness. For a man to love his wife as Jesus would love her requires absolute humility.
She's called to give deference to him as to the Lord, but he's never to lord it over her. This calls for mutual loving respect and cooperation between the two of them.
Not all men reach the final stage, a zaken, a sage or elder. Zaken means a gray-bearded wise man. He's a willing and available mentor, a man who's revered for the wisdom he's gained through life experience.
Even his past mistakes and sins of which he's repented have been used to teach him wisdom. But some men may have acted foolishly in prior stages and never grow in wisdom.
An elder is a man who's truly tasted our Father's mercy through forgiveness. He's now able to shepherd, that is, to pastor God's children. The zaken's wisdom and compassionate character enable him to represent our Father in caring for his people. The Apostle Peter is a striking example of a man who was fully aware of his past shortcomings. Yet he learned the wisdom of humility through his mistakes.
We want you to clearly understand this because it's a critical part of the Hebraic restoration. The older Zaken pastored God's faith communities as a servant leader for several centuries before the Hellenist influence introduced the system of young, educated clergy.
Zaken's years of experience and gaining understanding allow him to bring practical application to God's word when others ask.
In biblical times, the Hebraic elders who shepherded God's people passed along wisdom. They helped the people develop biblical applications to guide them into a way of life that pleases God.
It wasn't just theoretical or conceptual as so much Bible teaching is today. As we've shared in a previous lesson, the Hellenist teaching pattern only expands man's knowledge, but doesn't lead to a changed lifestyle.
Here are a few more questions for you to discuss. If you're a man, in what stage do those who know you well think you are?
If you're a younger man, what relationships do you have in place that are sources of mentoring for your life?
If you're in the mature or elder stage, what are you doing to make yourself available to to help younger men.